Now, cameras may not have been allowed in the courtroom by the judge's order, but Court TV did have people inside the courtroom providing us with daily updates, including our guest this evening, criminal defense attorney Bob Mata. Bob, you've been on with us for other cases. Thank you for joining us now for a quick debrief on this case. I must admit, I'm jealous. I would love to be sitting inside that courtroom. Tell us the latest out of that courtroom in Indiana today.
Well, hi, Judge, and it's a pleasure to be on with you and Michael again. So today, pins and needles. It was a full day of deliberation by the jury. Everybody out there was a lot of movement outside of the courthouse, as you can imagine. A lot of supporters, a lot of signs for justice for Abby and Libby. Just many people that are interested in this verdict coming down. We're out here waiting with bated breath. We came to learn just shy of 4 o'clock this afternoon that the jury had not reached a verdict and that they were going to retire for the evening and coming back tomorrow at 10 in the morning to start it all over again.
Ask you this first, and that is, before we talk about closing argument, I wanted to ask you this first. So a little inside baseball in terms of what's going on in that courtroom. My understanding is that the judge has said media and people there watching, they're not going to be given an opportunity if the jury has questions. They're not going to come back in the courtroom for any of that. The only thing we're going to get notice of is they'll let you know there's a verdict and you come back in. I just wanted to know if that was correct in terms of these deliberations.
Judge, that's what I'm hearing as well. And as somebody who has gone through the pains along with everybody else that sat in this courtroom for the last 3 weeks, it's disappointing that we're not going to be able to hear jury questions. They're such a integral part of any kind of trial process. But I'm hearing the same thing. It doesn't sound like we're going to be invited in order to hear what those jury's questions are. Whether or not those are going to be transmitted to us somehow, for those of us who are very much wanting to know what's going on in that courtroom, that's unknown as well. So we're just going to have to play it by ear. But I am hearing the same thing, that we're not invited in for questions, or if there's even going to be jury view requests. For instance, if they want to watch videos or they want to hear audios, obviously wouldn't be invited in for that, but it would be nice to know if they're asking for it.
All right, and tell me about those closing arguments. I agree with everything you said, Bob. Let me say that. It is too bad, but it is what it is. Any reaction from the jurors during closing arguments?
Judge, I'd say probably the two closest things that I guess I would characterize as a reaction were obviously when they showed the devastating crime scene photos of both Abby and Libby in their final resting state. Those were obviously hard to look at. So, you know, this has really been a stone-faced, poker-faced jury. They've been very good at not showing any emotions, which as an attorney I respect. You don't want them showing emotions as an attorney, because that's not what the rule of law requires. We're not making decisions on innocence or guilt based on our emotions. It's got to be the facts and the evidence and then the following of the law. So they've been excellent at doing that. But with respect to the victim crime scene photographs, I saw a little bit. And then when they showed Richard Allen during the defendant's closing argument done by Brad Rosie, at the very end of it, he showed the conditions in which Richard Allen was in his cell. You know, just the deplorable conditions. I saw some reactions from some jurors. Nothing overt. This is all very low-key reactions. There was nothing that would strike a chord or like, wow, that jury really reacted. But in terms of very, you know, tough to you have to really be watching type reactions. They were very subtle.
Wow.
Bob, you've been on our air many, many times. I always enjoy you as a guest. You've been sitting in that courtroom. You're a big-time defense attorney. What are your thoughts on this case? What do you think this jury might do?
Michael, you know, you've been doing this a long time, and if there's one absolute in the laws, you never know what a jury's going to do. You just don't. It's like you sit here. Every case I've ever tried, I've tried to read the tea leaves, so to speak, and trying to determine which way the jury's going to go. Is it bad that they're going this long? Is it good that they're going this long, depending on which side you're on? And it's just impossible to know. I tend to think that in a case like this where you have two beautiful young ladies that were killed, robbed of their lives, that the jury is acutely aware of that if they are going to acquit, if they're even thinking about acquitting this person, that they are going to go through that evidence not once, not twice, 3 times, 4 times, that they are going to be absolutely certain that they have reached the conclusion that the state has not met their burden. So, but I could be completely wrong about that. You know, this could be you have a split, and they're trying to fight it out in there. They're trying to reach a unanimous decision, which is obviously required. So it's hard to know. And you know, it's interesting in Indiana because you can hear a little bit, you can get into the minds of the jurors a little bit when they ask their questions. I love that. I love that they get to ask questions, because in the states where I've practiced, that was not a thing where we're getting to hear juror questions to witnesses, because it really does give you a mind's eye into what they might be thinking, especially about particular evidence. Like I thought that the questions that were asked regarding the unspent casing or the round that was found at the scene were very enlightening, and it told me there's at least one juror that found that to be pretty compelling evidence. So it's tough to tell. You know, I wouldn't even try to predict, because it would probably be wrong. If I were to think about all the predictions in my career out of my own cases, it's not a very good record.
Well, you never know what's going to happen,
That's
to
right.
your point, Bob, but I do have to push you a little bit and say, but as a defense attorney listening to the evidence that was presented, there was the bullet, there were the 60+ confessions, there were the video of the walking, talking of the individual on the bridge, and the van that he said scared him from doing what he was planning to do, and that's the evidence. Do you think that the defense has poked enough holes to see that perhaps there's reasonable doubt?
I do. I think that in any trial that I've ever been a part of or covered, I think that the amount of evidence that they were able to get in terms of the confinement conditions of Richard Allen was a breathtaking. I've never seen a defense be able to get that much evidence in terms of what was going on with Richard Allen. I really think that might have mitigated the whole confession issue. I think that this is going to boil down to whether or not they believe that Richard Allen is bridge guy. It could be as simple as, do they think that voice on that video matches Richard Allen? That's what I think it might boil down to. I honestly think that. I think that the defense did a pretty good job of kind of making the confessions not the primary piece of evidence, which you never want. You never want that in a case. You want the evidence from the crime scene that was basically discovered during the investigation to be the primary way that you are convicting somebody in a crime like this. You never want it to be in prison confessions that are, you know, basically generated as a result of him being held in, you know, solitary confinement for 13 months. You know, it's like that you don't want that to be the evidence. You want to feel secure. So do I think that there's enough for a jury to find him guilty? Yes, I do. Do I think that there's enough for them to find reasonable doubt? Yes, I do. I know that's kind of a political answer, Judge, but
no, it's great, because you're there. You've heard it.
Yeah, it's absolutely the truth. And Bob, one final question. A lot has been made about that video as well. A lot of people seem to think it looks like Richard Allen. That little bit of video that we have, that heroic video that we have that was taken by one of the girls. Based on your eye test, having seen him in person, do you think that person in that video that we're watching right there, bridge guy, physically, does he match that description?
Michael, you're going to hate this answer. I can't tell. Richard Allen is 5'5". All right, that, like, the first time I ever laid eyes on him 2 years ago, it blew my mind. I had no idea he was that small. I think the ultimate question is why didn't the state, which Rosie posed on his closing arguments, why didn't the state do a height analysis? Wouldn't that have been helpful to the jury? I think that it would have, and it was a question that was posed and there wasn't really an answer. I mean, he was dressed like probably about 70% of men in and around this county. You know, I mean, Carhartt jackets, jeans, and boots are what they wear. That's fact. So I don't find any of it to be overly compelling, and you really can't see his face. You know, how do you identify somebody without being able to see his face? At least to the extent where you're like, okay, I am comfortable enough that that is Richard Allen, and I'm going to convict him, effectively ending his life in terms of what he had known as his life. So it's hard to say, you know. I think that's why I'm saying I think the voice is going to be more important to them than the actual footage. And the problem with that is you can't see Bridge Guy's mouth moving. So it's a tough case. It's one of the things that's always drawn me into this case is I truly consider it a true whodunit to this day. After having sat through every minute of testimony and evidence, I just don't know. And I know that's the scary proposition, but you know, I can have my feelings, but in terms of the evidence that's presented, but I guess the question is, does that mean reasonable doubt?
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Exactly.
Sounds like it, Bob. But anyway, I'll tell you what I don't have a reasonable doubt about. You did a fantastic job for us. Truly appreciate it, Bob.
Yeah.
Hopefully, again, we'll see you real soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all that information.